Thank you for joining us for another Sales and Marketing Fry Talk. As usually, every second Friday, we share insights, best practices, and anecdotes from technology companies. And this time, we have a really very interesting guest, Frank Sondors, the B2B sales veteran, working for like big names like Google, Black Crow, and SimilarWeb, and Whatagraph, and what's not. And he recently launched his own business, and when we had just a conversation some time ago, he shared that just within 3 months they managed really to grow from 0 to 50 paying customers. And I thought, hey, it's actually a very interesting story to learn from. And so therefore we invited Frank to come and to share his journey to these 50 customers. So welcome, Frank.
Hello.
Welcome.
So yeah, maybe a bit about me, just on that. So yeah, I've worked for a bunch of different companies, and then I guess it came to a point when I was leading a sales team, a large sales team back in my days. And I thought to myself, there's a bunch of problems that still need to be solved, and I could build a great software around that. And yeah, a bit about Salesforge. So what we do essentially is we enable companies, whether that's a startup or a scale up or even sales development agencies, to send unique emails at any scale in any language. So the problem really we're tackling is the problem with templates and the fatigue, the problem with email deliverability, and the problem that happens actually within large sales organizations in particular, that there's a lot of sales reps, so we're able to actually to drastically minimize the necessity of that. So yeah, I mean, that's something that we launched as a company back in June, and yeah, we've been successfully scaling. So happy to kind of walk through maybe things that you really need to do kind of even prior to launching a company, or your business, and kind of getting ready, getting that wait list maybe in place, and many other things, and showcasing that initial traction. And actually, if you're raising your first round, whether that's an angel round or a proper pre-seed round, you need to show that in front of your VC. So yeah. So should we dive deeper more into that, or do you want to start Andrei with a specific question?
So thanks for this introduction. And no, I think we definitely would like to go a bit more deeper into your journey, right? And what was? Can you maybe share what was your basically starting point, and how did you draw your strategy? What was strategy to acquiring these 50 customers, and what particularly unique is about this strategy comparing to maybe traditional approach?
Yeah, so typically when you come up with a problem area where you have a great idea, you want to kind of start building it. I think one of the first things you want to ask yourself, whether you have sort of validated that idea. So have you done enough user interviews, surveys, etc., to ensure that you're on the right track? Even though you may be a domain expert in your field, it's important to bounce your sort of ideas off other people that are also in the same space and essentially potentially maybe using your product for a very long time. So what we've done is we were sort of working on this idea since January this year. So we only launched in June, so you can see there's 6 months work that essentially went into it, whether that's building, doing user interviews. So we've done 45 user interviews to really validate our idea. Some of these user interviews actually resulted in pre-sales of our product. And then we also managed to pre-sell to other people. And also the weirdest example was actually me talking about what we're building in a coffee shop in Berlin. And there was this random guy who was just listening into my conversation with another person and said, damn, this is a great idea. Can I buy this? And literally within the coffee shop, the guy bought a subscription of Salesforge. So that's probably the weirdest sort of pre-sale that we had. So I think the one way to look at it is and how can you validate your idea is, will somebody pull out their credit card and pay for this particular product, even though there isn't a single line of code written? If you can get a few people literally pulling their credit card and then paying for it, it's well done on you. And I think it doesn't happen in most of the times. Like 99% of the startups that are being built, there are no pre-sales, there are no pre-orders for what is it that you're building. And the best validation for what you're building is somebody actually paying for it before it even exists. So this is exactly what we did, whether that was through reviews, through our network, etc. And then when it came sort of closer to the launch date, we were naturally amplifying our message across different channels. So naturally, because we're in sales, we do a lot of that on LinkedIn. But because a lot of our audience is in the US, we also tapped into Reddit. Reddit is super popular, in particular in the US. And also various sort of Slack communities that also exist specifically for sales and marketing. And there's a lot of them. If you need any sort of guidance around potentially, where to find them, you can just go to a website called the Hive Index. And the Hive Index is essentially a directory of various communities around the world. And this is, one of the ways how you can connect with your ideal customer, essentially. And then the other way to sort of connect with folks and kind of ramp up essentially users on your waitlist would be to also utilize Facebook groups as well. So that's another way to how you can find sort of potential customers quickly and make them jump on a user interview. And then the final thing would be actually to do what we actually do as a business, which is just emailing people and asking them, hey, listen, I'm building this sort of product to help you tackle these various problems. Would you be interested kind of sharing your feedback and so see whether I'm on the right track? So these are multiple different ways how you kind of prepare for a great launch, so that when you actually launch, you're already getting quite a few customers through the doors as well. So
yeah. Maybe let's come back to this first step you mentioned about like having these initial interviews and interviewing almost 50 potential buyers and doing some pre-sale same time and so on. Many customers of ours and companies in general, they actually skip this part. So what we have seen many times that companies actually very much rely on the internal kind of knowledge, internal kind of intelligence on the market, and they believe that that is what actually exists. And I think you proved it once again that it's not a good strategy, and it's better to have kind of some external audience with whom you can validate and check your ideas and fine-tune even, right? But one of the reasons why they don't do that is also that they simply don't have those customers, especially in the very beginning, like whom we will interview, they ask us, right? What was your particular approach to finding those nearly 50 people whom you could talk to?
That's a good question. So typically when you're a user, you're just, you're working for a company, whether you're a founder or whether you're head of finance, etc. You have a day-to-day job to do, and you have various pains as a potential user. And those pains are potentially solved by a software. Maybe it's solved by just Excel, etc. But you have those pains as a user on a day-to-day basis. Now, when you reach out to anybody out there, you really want to talk about that pain that you can potentially solve for them. And you want to, and users love to share, the stuff that they sort of are grumpy about, essentially what they don't like, essentially in their daily jobs, what's painful for them, because we all want to, have seamless workflows in our environment, etc. But they may not be a software that actually delivers on that. So when you're reaching out to a person, doesn't matter whether it's on a Slack community or maybe some sort of WhatsApp group or on LinkedIn or etc. When you're saying, hey, listen, I believe you potentially may have this pain, and I would love to ask you a few questions just to kind of to get your thoughts around, what do you use? How does it currently look like? Because I'm looking actually to help people like you to solve that pain. With the product that I'm potentially building, and I want to sort of build a product that would really solve it for you. So when it's actually launched, you would potentially may buy this sort of product. So you definitely want to sort of co-develop with your users through multiple touch points, whether that's a form of interview or anything else. So definitely outline the pain, outline that it will only take sort of 15-20 minutes just to ask a few questions, and make sure these questions sort of are spot on. So in my case, I had a template, so just a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask, and it was a more or less sort of semi-structured interview, where I just wanted to really kind of dig deep into their pain and really try and figure out, what we're building is the right thing or not really. And then you need to interview also different types of people. So for example, because I'm building a sales technology, you also need to speak, for example, frontline sales reps. So for example, sales development reps or account executives. Then you need to speak somebody that's more operational. So that's sales operations manager, revenue operations managers, and then the heads of the departments. So for example, VP sales, head of sales, etc. So these are the titles that you need to target. If you need a tool that you can maybe reach out more systematically, I would recommend using Apollo.io, which is what we used to reach out initially, because we didn't have our own software to reach out to folks yet. And then because Apollo offers the data, so you can sort of filter it for specific titles, and then you can actually reach out through with a template. And guess what? It has actually worked really well. The reply rates were really good because we're targeting the right people. We're talking about the pain that we potentially were having, and guess what? People are happy to share the feedback to help them have sort of a better work life essentially in the future. And then you build what's called an MVP, a minimum viable product, right? So and then with that minimum viable product, you then potentially go back to the same people, or you just keep on showing this to the new people and say, hey, if something like this would exist in the market and would do these sort of things, would you be interested to buy this actually? So as you're progressing as a company and as you're building your product out, you're either showing the same product, so that product that you're already building, that MVP, to the people that you already talked to, or to the new people as well. And because what you want to do as a really great founder is you want to be co-building that product with your users. Essentially, whether they're paying you or not, it doesn't really matter. But you're building it for that particular audience, and you definitely want to be bouncing off various ideas, whether that's a little feature, even a button. So for example, yesterday we spoke to a user about our navigation on a mobile device, that it needs improving because they would like to see it there. And we agree with that, right? So, and it's not necessarily, so we don't use our product on a mobile device, but guess what? We have quite a few people that use our product on a mobile device, which is kind of weird. But so we now have to think about how to improve the experience on mobile. So that's exactly what you want to do. And I think it's important that you have your landing page also up as quickly as possible. So my recommendation is to go to card.co. Card is CARRD.co. On card.co, you can buy a landing page for $20 a year. So I mean, it's super cheap, right? And then they have a template, I believe, or something. You can just set it up. Just say, hey, this is what I'm building. And because people like to kind of, before they, say yes to an interview, they like to have a look at least a landing page. What is it that you're building? And saying this is coming soon, and this is what we're looking to build, right? So it gives them a bit of imagination, and also drastically improves your credibility, I must say. Because if you're going to be reaching out to people with your personal email address at gmail.com, it's not going to be that credible. But if you already have sort of an email address and actually a domain, etc., people definitely will be more inclined to have a chat with you. You just look more credible rather than using @gmail.com, because you can only use @gmail.com, I would argue, only with people that you know, essentially. So essentially with your network. But typically, if you're building a product, those people, for a particular audience, you don't know those people and they don't know you. So there's definitely a bit of sort of credibility, I would say, if you would use @gmail.com. So I do know other founders that have struggled to secure interviews because they didn't have a custom domain essentially that they were able to use to reach out to users.
Did you use also any incentive to kind of get these people spending time with you, or is there any tip what you could share?
So I didn't use any incentive, but I can say that if you are struggling because I was not struggling to secure interviews, but if a founder is struggling to secure interviews, then I would say just give them a €5 Starbucks voucher or something like that. It doesn't have to be a lot, like €5. That's all. Just as a thank you for that time. It's more of a a mechanism. It doesn't have to be a €100 Amazon voucher or something like that. But just a nice gesture, like a €5 Starbucks voucher,
Yes.
in particular, if that country has Starbucks, like the UK, let's say Germany, etc., then people will appreciate it, and they will be more inclined to say yes. Just make sure you follow up with that, €5 voucher. Yeah, so that's definitely like a hook. The other hooks could be, so we haven't used any hooks because it was easy for us to get these interviews. But if it wouldn't be easy, then yes, we would resort to either some sort of voucher, either giving a heftier discount for the product, etc. We already had a huge discount in place actually for the product as part of our pre-order strategy. So instead of charging, let's say, a monthly subscription for a product, we said, hey, listen, for a 5-year deal, you would get the subscription for $99. That's what we did. So currently on our website, somebody would pay actually $96 for a month. But back then, as part of the pre-order, you could get a 5-year deal for $99. And so this is how we incentivize those pre-orders. This is how we want to also showcase the really early traction to our investors and angels, etc., that we were speaking back then, that we're really able to validate, the product, that somebody would be able to pull out a credit card and just pay for this. Yeah, and I mean, the other way to look at it is the freebies that you could get on the call for the other user, right? For the interviewee, is that you may be able to share your domain expertise. So because I specialize, let's say, in cold emailing and a few other sales areas, I'm able to share some of the experience with them or help them out in a particular area that which is something that we discussed in the call. And it becomes a free consulting session, maybe for like 10 minutes or something. Or people follow up with you later via LinkedIn to ask you a few questions. So that did happen because naturally, if I'm a salesperson, I'm talking to another salesperson, there's typically something to learn from another person if we've been around the space for a long time. Yeah, and that's something that people also appreciated because they were able essentially to ask also questions to me, whether that's about my experience in the past or how would I potentially tackle a problem that they have right now, which has nothing to do with the interview. So that's the value that they would receive. So you could position yourself as a subject matter expert, where they could pick your brain for like 5-10 minutes as part of the interview to ask anything that they wish. So that's exactly also what happened in the call. But I didn't position this like that in the initial reach out. But this is something that I think was natural for the people to ask. And I would expect that any other founder who is a subject matter expert would happen something similar, I would say.
No, thanks for this what you shared so far. But for me, it seems that like probably the very initial step, understanding these pain points very well through those interviews and other insights of your customers, also in a way helping you to succeed in the further interviews, but also like subscribing people to your idea, right? And then you don't need to incentivize anyone to talk to you, right? And second, what you mentioned, I understood, is about showing your own expertise and actually helping people with the subject, particularly on what they are struggling with. And on that, I would like to ask you, and obviously we all, or most of people, like see LinkedIn as one of the platforms where you can really showcase your expertise in particular domain, maybe, share some thoughts and ideas and maybe some content. What was your practical approach to that? Did you subscribe to some particular, I don't know, opinion leaders or maybe some interest groups? Did it work for you, or maybe you mainly shared your own content? If you could just maybe share that part as well.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is important, particularly if you are selling marketing technology product, sales technology products. So if your audience is on LinkedIn, then yes, you should invest in LinkedIn. For us, that was definitely the case. LinkedIn is the number one platform where our audience is. So you want to be sharing sort of two types of content at least. One is about the pains that you're solving as a product. So talk particularly about the pain, and then potentially Salesforge being one of the solutions. But then the other type of content, because I'm a founder, a lot of people are interested to follow you as a founder. So you also share founder updates, whether you're participating in conferences or doing other things. So people just like to follow your progress. And also, because I connect with investors, if investors follow your progress on LinkedIn as well. So it's super important that you do have at least these two types of content that's available on LinkedIn. That you're consistently sort of generating. Now, it does take a lot of time, and though I can tell you that it's super valuable to do that, because we actually track where the user actually signs up on our website. So we ask questions, hey, where did you hear about us? And guess what? We do have a lot of leads that just say, hey, LinkedIn post or LinkedIn, that just put in there. And guess what happens prior to that? I posted something on LinkedIn. So you generate leads consistently from LinkedIn, and we are able to attribute to sort of our activity, everything that we do on LinkedIn. So that's important to do. But from a standpoint of me as a founder, to kind of figure out what I'm doing the right things, I am following, let's say, thought leaders in the sales technology space, or just, sales influencers, or even competitors. It's super important that you follow your top competitors to understand, what is it they're shipping, because ultimately the goal is not to copy what they do, but your goal as a founder to figure out your moat or your differentiation in the market. Why should people buy from you that you're doing something, things in a particular way that nobody else does? Because you're not going to win in the market if you're doing exactly the same as somebody else. But then becomes a question, who has the cheapest price, right? Because there's no other differentiation. So it's not just about copying your competitors, but it's important to have them on your radar. So you have to engineer your feed in the following way. There's three types of essentially people that you, in my case, I have to follow. First of all, it would be actually my clients or my potential clients. Number two is these sales influencers, these thought leaders that share, how, the world may evolve, what we have to think about it when it comes to AI and stuff like that. And number three will be definitely competitors. So the reason why competitors are important is in particular in categories where you have a lot of competitors. So in our case, we have probably over 20 competitors at least, right? So and everybody over them specializes in a different area. One of them has this feature, one of them has that feature. But it's just important when you open on LinkedIn, it becomes like a newspaper for you, right? You scroll through the feed and you see, okay, what's happening, who has done something, what an investor has raised, 100 million in Series D, whatever. And you're like, okay, so they're raising a lot of money. Okay, they're moving this direction, and then I have to move this direction, right? So because again, we're not looking to copy necessarily our competitors. But to win in a crowded market, you need to figure out what's your long-term strategy, how you're going to win this, because that's also how you can communicate to your investors as well. Hey, listen, we're going to compete against those big guys, those incumbents in this particular way through this sort of strategy. And to figure out, what's the strategy of your competitors, just following them on social. They all, boast about themselves, promote themselves all the time, what they do, and blah, 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 all this stuff. So yeah. So that's important. Yeah, and naturally, by kind of showcasing what you do on LinkedIn, like I mentioned, that generates for you leads. You can follow up with people. It definitely helps you in many different ways, really. So,
yeah. Besides the LinkedIn, you mentioned about the other channels. Could you maybe share a little bit more on why did you use these channels and how particularly did you use it?
Yeah, so when you think about what I call channel saturation. So channels like LinkedIn or email are very saturated these days. There's a lot of emails that are being sent, a lot of cold emails that are being sent. Same on LinkedIn. There's a lot of activity, a lot of people sending you stuff. Whether that's templated or not doesn't matter, but it becomes very saturated also on LinkedIn. So you have to go to places where it's not necessarily that saturated, but still your audience is in there. So, I already mentioned several examples of Slack communities, right? So there are Slack communities, whether they are for salespeople, product managers, marketing people, founders, etc. And there's a bunch of them. And you don't see that, over sort of saturation in those particular communities. And you have essentially a better likelihood of connecting with your potential buyers in those. So, but those sort of channels or communities that don't necessarily scale by any means, but that's totally fine, because in the early days as a founder, you have to do things that don't scale. So if you just Google on the term things that don't scale, you'll find more kind of insights around that. But you ultimately need to tap into different sort of communities, pockets of audience in order to grow in the early days and show that traction. But once you start scaling as a business, you need to figure out what's the core channel for you, really. So
yeah, absolutely. But Frank, how did you found these communities? Because I mean, obviously there are many of them, and as you mentioned, they are very niche. Sometimes they are like for like some group of people. How did you learn about these communities, and how did you basically manage to find the right places to be?
Yeah, there's two ways to go about this. So when I was conducting user interviews, you ask them, hey, which communities or places do you hang out in? Would you recommend a community that I would join? It could be part of your interview process, right? Because use your customers to find essentially more customers. That should be your kind of overall strategy. And then the second way is there's a bunch of communities you may not think of, but are of high value to you. So that's what I recommend to use. That's what I recommend to use the Hive index. So if you just Google it, the Hive index. The Hive index is essentially a marketplace of communities. You can also submit your own community if you want to, and then people can filter by different tags, different filters, and they can find their communities. And this is how you can create your own community. And guess what we did? We also created our own community, we call it the Salesforge HQ. It's a Slack-based community, and essentially it allows us to combine what we call our existing customer base with our potential future customer base. So that's where we're sort of starting to grow that. It has a few hundred members already in it. And it has different sort of Slack channels, like whether we talk about lead generation, whether people want to promote some stuff or whatever. It's a typical community, and we will be investing more into that, the more sort of resources we have, because we definitely have community as our sort of strategy going forward, where we want to have essentially thousands of users discussing sales and marketing. It's something that we will power or sort of moderate rather than power through the community. So
yeah, okay. And if you look back to your journey from this zero ground, right, to 50 customers in 3 months, as we started the conversation with, what you would recommend others like to prioritize and to make mandatory steps in their journey?
Mandatory steps. So, I mean, you definitely need to do what I would call weekly planning. So what is it that you're looking to execute on a weekly basis? And as part of the planning is you typically figure out, the activities that you will want to do, maybe not even on a weekly basis, but even on a monthly basis. So for example, one of the kind of mandatory things that I would argue that you should do as quickly as you can would be actually to launch on Product Hunt. Now, Product Hunt is not a big thing in some parts of the world, but overall, when you're launching a product and you want to get some visibility in your early days, you go and launch on Product Hunt within 6 months, I would say. So we launched in September. We got the number 2 spot on Product Hunt. We're actually competing as a Y Combinator back company, so we had no chance to compete against them and get the first spot. But it gave us a lot of visibility, a lot of leads, new clients, and that's something that is an example of what you should have on your checklist. So there are these, I'm gonna call this mini projects that you need to do. The other mini project you may sort of consider sort of investing your time in is potentially sponsoring in the early days, let's say a newsletter. So an example of a newsletter, let's say if you are targeting startups like we did, there's a newsletter called startups.fyi. So that's an example of a newsletter that you could sponsor for maybe a month, 2, 3. It costs like $50 to sponsor it, and this is one way of how you can generate leads, right? So essentially sponsoring, essentially.
Yes.
But so you should be definitely having these what I call tests. So we, for example, figure out that newsletters don't generate for us enough leads. And it's not something we want to continue on doing, essentially, right? But you definitely need to run these tests. So you have to say to yourself, okay, in the early days, I will be doing, these, let's say 5 different tests. So we're going to be sponsoring newsletters. I will be maybe sending cold emails. I will be, trying to do something in these Slack communities. But you have to slate those tests. So every month, you have a 1 or 2 tests at a minimum that you're testing. And if it works, you just continue doing that. If it doesn't, you move on to the next test, essentially. And it's important that you're doing that. You need to figure out where you can get your sort of early user base. And sometimes it's a place that you would not think of, really. So it could be literally you posting something on YouTube about your product, and suddenly it may be trending, right? So you should even test YouTube. So for example, we did that. We already have a YouTube channel. We talk about what is it that we do, and we'll be doing more so of that, because if you think about it, how a user thinks, right? So a user has a problem, and they may be actually searching about that problem on YouTube. So what if you had a corresponding video for that particular product, right? So then the probability of them kind of bumping into your website is much, much higher. Then another strategy I think that has worked really well, especially for the early days and the 50 plus clients that we currently have, is building out what's called competitor landing pages. Because if you're in a very crowded market, and you have a lot of competitors, typically users are aware of alternatives essentially in the market, and they'll be searching on Google, what's the alternative to this software they're using right now, because they're not happy and they'll be churning with that software. So if you have a corresponding landing page that talks about the alternative to, I don't know, HubSpot as an example, and these are high intent pages, and it's very actually easy to sort of templatize them and ship them essentially. So we've been doing that, for example, as well, which has helped us to acquire new leads. And then the other things which are sort of lightweight, I would say, is to do sort of a couple other things. So one example is like being on a podcast like this, for example. And then the other thing would be to be a guest on the blog of one of the what I call sort of adjacent potentially technologies. So let's say we do sales technology. So we send emails, as an example, and we may work with another company that provides data, right, for salespeople. And we may post on their blog something, right? So people then read a blog post on their website about, why you should write unique emails, etc. And then that also generates for you some of the leads. So you need to do these, little things and to try and see what really works for you. There's no one major channel in the early days. You need to do you also need to be a bit of a jack of all trades. You need to do a bit of marketing, a bit of sales, a bit of website development using Webflow, etc. And I think what one major thing I found, actually, founders making a huge mistake from day even zero, like before even the product even exists, is they don't give a way for the user to ask any question to that founder. And that question should be asked really on the website. So what I really mean by this is founders typically don't have this chat widget on the website. So you go on a lot of websites and you can see it's just a website. So you either sign up for a trial or that's it. If you didn't get what the product does, etc., people just bounce essentially. But what I found that works really well across pretty much any business, if you just have the ability to ask a question on the website to a real person. So
it did work for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it works for anybody, especially in the early days. So when you're building a product and you also build out your first copy on your website, like this is what we do, and these are various images, etc. People, you may not be answering a particular question that the user has when they're landing in your website. So if you don't give the ability to ask that question sort of instantly within a chat interface, where there's another human being, which is essentially a founder, that's able to answer that relatively quickly, then you lose that essentially potential client. I can tell you that in previously to Salesforge, we have generated some of the largest deals through chat. Just by a person asking a simple question that was not answered on the website, because the website can't answer every single question. Doesn't matter how many landing pages you build out, etc. A user just bumped on the website, looked at it, doesn't get the answer immediately, and the easiest thing for them to do would be just to ask. This is what a typical user would do. So for that, you need a chat function on the website, and a lot of founders just don't have that. So they are losing a lot of potential leads. I found and it has worked for us, amazingly. So we, for example, use Intercom. For startups gives 1 year free as well. So, yeah, this example. Yeah, go on. You had a question?
No, I just wanted to say, finish please about the Intercom. You said you're using the Intercom and.
So Intercom is the #1 chat app, and the beauty with Intercom is that for the first year you don't have to pay for it, being a startup founder. And it has all the functionality that you may need as a startup founder. And then the beauty with Intercom is that you can build out what's called a knowledge base or a help desk, where you can actually have various articles about your product or how to use it, etc., which is super powerful. So that is also important because you need to have that sort of knowledge base, especially if you have a product-led growth and you want people just to check out an article and kind of go through that. So super important. So Intercom has that. I found it to be super valuable. It does, though, become very expensive the more you sort of scale in the future. So yeah, that's the downside of Intercom. But maybe just to add here around Intercom, also why it's super powerful,
because we're time able to run out and we actually need to wrap up.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So sorry, Frank. I don't know. There is again some issue with the connection. I apologize for that. But nevertheless, I would like to really thank you for sharing your journey, your story, and at least for me, it was really useful. And even I didn't know a couple of things what you shared. And I hope for the listeners and for those who are watching us now also they see it valuable. And I just wanted to wish you really keep moving the same as you are like doing now with huge success. And we will be definitely monitoring how Salesforge is developing, and we are probably hoping then having you back in some time, success of your another, let's say, a phase of the development of the company. And I just once again thank you for coming and sharing that with us.
No worries. If anybody has any questions, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, and otherwise I'll see you on the other side.
Yeah. So for all who was with us, thank you as well for joining our conversations. Sorry for these technical glitches. Yeah, what we have, I don't know. At least I have it today, and I just would like to remind that you can follow us on LinkedIn and use hashtag FryTalks to find information about other episodes what we had. And you always can turn to the podcast platforms and search for the B2B Sales and Marketing FryTalks, and there we will find all previous episodes. We have more than 40, nearly to 50 episodes already, from startup founders to corporate executives and many others who share their insights and best practices. So thank you for being with us, and then we meet again in 2 weeks, and we continue learning from each other. So have a great rest of the Friday.